Assalamu alaikum and welcome to Perspective. We'll be talking about the political situation as far as after the disqualification as it's come for the former Prime Minister Imran Khan and what it means. Of course, the PTI is likely to be in court on Monday. And the ECP also is likely to start criminal proceedings against the former Prime Minister in law courts. We'll be talking about the ramifications of what it means overall for the political process, considering that Imran Khan still maintains that he will give a date for the long march in the next week. He also maintains that this will be a safe long march for children and women, and that it's not likely to, and it will be a peaceful long march. The government, on the other hand, maintains that they will not object to a peaceful protest of any kind, but will ensure law and order. We saw, of course, there are moral repercussions of this decision. Also, we'll be talking about that as far as the narrative of the PTI is concerned, as far as the narrative of the former Prime Minister, which rests on truthfulness, which rests on the honesty, which has been his main focus against the opposition. What it means for that narrative, for his supporters, all of that today on Perspective. I have with me Aneek Zafar, who's a political analyst. Thank you for being with us today. We have Barrister Yasir Latif Hamdani, who's a legal expert. Thank you for joining us. Aneek Sab, overall, certainly the legal side of things, I think, have been debated for a while, I mean, since the judgment came a few days ago. But it's in terms of the moral side of things, the narrative of the PTI has been about cleanliness in the political process, about his government being clean, his government following procedure in all respects. This indicates a lot of deviations if the judgment, according to the Election Commission, one goes through that. How do you look at that in terms of that narrative of the PTI?
So, in terms of the impact of this on this whole saga of disqualification by Election Commission of Pakistan and the other political developments around it, one thing is certain that the verdict itself or the ramifications of it, these are as messy and as chaotic as Pakistani political landscape has always been. The verdict of the Election Commission is being challenged, is being discussed. PTI has approached the High Court for it. Tomorrow there will be a hearing on that. As far as the narrative of PTI is concerned, it's on clean and truthfulness and honesty and transparency. I think what they have been able to do is that they have been able to at least convince their own target audience and their own PTI's constituency on that. But slowly and gradually, I think that veneer is being taken away. This verdict, as most people are confused, that this verdict is about taking gifts from Toshahana and that those were taken under a law. But that is not the case. Here the verdict is about concealment of the facts, about misdeclaration in the assets declaration to the Election Commission and at some stage to the tax authorities. I think with the tax authorities later, the returns were revised, but in the initial filings there were problems. So this verdict actually shows that Mr. Khan was not as clean as he wants himself to project. But obviously PTI and Khan still has that narrative that it is just a few hundred millions, and he compares himself to other cases.
But is it about the scale? Let me come back to you. Yasir, is this about the scale at all? Like Aneek Saab is saying, this is also about concealment, it's about misdeclaration, all of those things. And less about the scale. I mean, it's not important what the scale of, the money involved is, or what the scale of concealment in this case is, right?
I think scale is absolutely not the issue. Remember, we sent home an elected Prime Minister, a thrice elected Prime Minister for an asset receivable which wasn't declared, and that was absolutely much less than the millions and millions that are being alleged or not being alleged, but which are now part of record, the ECP record. So I think scale has never been the issue. The issue is that Mr. Imran Khan promised a clean administration, but while he was in government, he was taking these gifts and taking them out and then undervaluing them, paying only a fraction of that amount, then selling them at market value outside with additional premium of the fact that they were from heads of state, etc., and their sentimental value, and then not showing that on his tax and on his assets and liabilities as it was supposed to be disclosed on his statement to the ECP.
But what is the contention of the PTI in this regard? What is the narrative? Does it not lead a blow to that narrative as it's been put forward by the PTI from the very beginning? Because you know that change in transparency, like Anik Saab is saying, it is a blow to that narrative itself. Do you think it's going to get? I mean, it's going to have an impact on his supporters?
I don't know if it's going to have an impact on his supporters or not, but I think definitely the chink in his armor has happened. You know, we can now see that Mr. Imran Khan is not that clean, Mr. Clean that people thought, not the incorruptible politician as people imagined him to be. And that is something that has been clear. So, I mean, if I would speak frankly, I've never for a very long time believed that to be the case. I mean, the man has virtually no sources of income. So how is he carrying on? All of these are major question marks on Mr. Imran Khan's credibility. Yet for some reason he has been able to convince his followers that he's the only one who's not corrupt in the country. I think that by now his followers should have woken up, but the problem with these populist politicians, and I think we have to go back to Mr. Donald Trump in the United States. He famously said, I can shoot someone in the middle of Fifth Avenue and my supporters will still support me. So given that that is the kind of charisma and the kind of hold that Mr. Imran Khan, our Desi version of Trump, has on his
Let me come back to you. We have with us Murtaza Solanki, who's a senior journalist. Ji, Munsab, can you please hear me?
Yes, I can.
We're talking about the narrative of the PTI as it stands after the decision of disqualification from the ECP. Overall, how do you look at things now after the decision has come, and in terms of the kind of assertions, aspirations that are being cast on the ECP for a while now by the PTI? That's no secret. By Imran Khan Saab, the former Prime Minister himself, that's also clearly evident. How do you see that? I mean, in terms of the fact that the institutions against PTI, and you know, whenever a decision comes, we've seen that the kind of backlash that comes from PTI with regard to particular individuals, with regard to institutions also, there's nothing new there. What's your view on that?
Well, when it comes to election commission and the chief election commissioner and their role and their performance, Imran Khan probably can only either fool himself or his followers, because the documented facts clearly say that the current chief election commissioner was the choice of Imran Khan and his party, nobody else. It was not the desire of the establishment or the then opposition that's ruling now. There is just too much evidence proving that Sikandar Sultan Raja was the choice of PTI. Now, how come they started going against him and the election commissioner? It started from Daska. If you remember that famous fog that stole the elections, and the election commission decided to have re-election, ending up PTI losing that seat. And since then, they have been pressurizing the election commission, and the pressure tactics and the blackmail against election commission started almost 8 years ago in the foreign funding case. So Imran Khan is a known, a chronic, a dedicated, and I would say sincere blackmailer who has constantly blackmailed all institutions of national power. Now, his announcement yesterday that on Thursday or Friday he would give a call for long march is actually another blackmailing tactic, originally aimed at affecting and influencing the process of the appointment of army chief, which is his unconstitutional demand. And another purpose of this blackmailing was to somehow force the hand of the current government to go for early poll. That too has been rejected. And now the only aim that he can, he's desiring, the goal in front of him right now is somehow create some pressure to get an NRO from other cases that are following him. It's not just the election commission verdict that is probably going to be heard at Islamabad High Court tomorrow. But there are other very, very potential cases, including 190 million pounds that were transferred by NCA and illegally got transferred in the account of a business tycoon. And as a quid pro quo, Imran Khan got around 5 to 7 billion rupees worth land for Al-Qadir University and for another lady who was their business partner, Farah, alias Gogi. So that is the purpose. And
but what do you think
goal.
is likely to happen? I mean, of course, there are these a couple of days now in which one can wait, but then there's likely you think there's going to be a further extension to the date of the long march. What do you think will happen now in terms of the future course of action for the PTI?
Well, October has almost run its course. Now he's saying probably 27th or 28th. At the same time, he's giving conflicting and mixed signals. On one hand, he says it will be a party time. So the families and children will come and have a regular PTI public meeting, which is full of fun and music and all that. Well, that might be a one-night stand. That it can't be a dharna, a sit-in to dislodge a government. But if he desires to do that, there are already clear announcements and declaration by the federal government as well as the security establishment that they will not allow conquering of the national capital.
He's also said that, he says that it's unlikely that the government will go. It seems to be an admission. During the last conversation, the press talk that he had, he said that it's unlikely that there will be early elections. Yet there is that demand of early elections, and for that there is the dharna. So what is behind the whole, in terms of course, going back to the assemblies? On the one hand, we are seeing no movement there. Do you think that there's also reports of there being talks? Do you think there's likely to be some sort of agreement and a return to the assemblies from the PTI? Of course, right now we are hearing a categorical no.
It's pretty clear, and it's not a news in Islamabad that PTI is also engaging the federal government at a second tier level. Those talks are still ongoing. The objective of those talks is also to get another NRO, some kind of concession for Imran Khan in the impending cases and also their top leadership. Same is the goal of this party type rally or public meeting he's about to announce on 27. So both tactics are aimed at getting an NRO. That is the only objective. And if these talks succeed or if there is any movement, the only possibility, only face-saving for Imran Khan is to go back to the parliament as he did in 2015-16 after the failure of his 2014 Dharna.
But Murtaza, do you think that he expects perhaps to lose his support if he goes back to the assembly after having so vociferously denied the fact that he says that he doesn't admit to the existence, the validity of this assembly. He says because it comprises of people who are not clean, that whole narrative. Do you think that if he now chooses to go back to the assemblies, it will perhaps damage his narrative further?
He has to lose anyway. Failure is something that is destined for him. If he goes for a high-stake confrontation, he would probably lose big. But if he goes back to the parliament, he would still lose, maybe less. So there's a trade-off. He has to pick what losses he can afford by going back to the parliament or going towards a militant confrontation against the federal government.
Do you think there's also, after the decision came on Friday disqualifying him, do you think that there was an expectancy of perhaps more people coming out, of there being more show of support for the former Prime Minister, and that didn't happen, and that's also a factor in the way to proceed now for the PTI?
This is another abysmal performance that shows Imran Khan is living in a la-la land. If you remember, if you go back on April 9, the night of vote of no confidence, just before that vote was tabled, Imran Khan and his top-notch leaders had sent messages, voice messages through WhatsApp and other means to have a big public meeting on D Chowk soon after the verdict. But you saw the people, the protesters who came after sacking and dismissal of Imran Khan were big enough to be hauled into police vans. So there is a series of abysmal performance of protest by Imran Khan, and the protest that was portrayed as spontaneous was actually organized, was ordered.
Do you think it's about organization? Do you think it's about organization, or is it what is? I mean, we saw what happened on the 25th of May also. Do you think it's the failure to mobilize their support base is something that has been of concern to the PTI? Do you think it's it's that failure to mobilize? Do you think they'll be able to mobilize their people whenever the general election is held, and for that support which they seem to bank on to actually translate into votes also?
Well, we will see when elections are held who is popular, what political party is popular. We don't know. If you go by the public assessments on April 9, the most unpopular politician of Pakistan was Imran Khan. So popularity is a bubble. It's a balloon that can change its size. So let's see if this current coalition government, if they perform well in a year or so before the parliament is dissolved, maybe you will have different results. So it's very difficult to predict right now. But the very fact that no huge turnout of people came out on Friday after disqualification of Imran Khan says that people will come out if issues about their existence, the issues that affect common man are raised in a movement or campaign. Imran Khan's disqualification is not an issue that affects 220 million people. Their issues are different. It's the price hike. It's inflation. Sin is inundated. There's a huge deluge. You know, those are
right.
the
Thank you
issues
so
that
much
can
for being with
mobilize.
us. Thank you for joining us, Murtaza Solanki Sahab. Thank you for being
Thank
with
you.
us. Ji, Aneek Sahab, you think that it's about, of course, so ultimately, according to what Murtaza Sahab is saying, it seems that, you know, what it will matter about controlling inflation, it will matter about performance overall, things that are of concern to you know, to the people at this time, rather than anything else, to the performance, what happens in the next elections. But then on the other hand, if you talk to the PTI supporters, they say look at the by-polls.
Yeah, I tend to agree somewhat with Murtaza that people have different issues right now. People are concerned about inflation, they are concerned about rising fuel prices, energy prices, and their day-to-day life is becoming difficult. But one thing which I think we forget is that pie in the sky populism has its own attraction for the constituents, and that has been successfully that strategy has been successfully managed by PTI and its leader Mr. Imran Khan, the former Prime Minister. They have been able to create a perception as if that hakiki azadi or real freedom, whatever way you want to translate it, is the real issue. And once you achieve that, then perhaps all these issues will also settle. But again, as Murtaza said, that these kinds of populisms can, for a time period, be very, very popular, be very attractive to the masses. But in the end, when the general elections are called, by-elections, of course, they performed well, but we can clearly see that perhaps the opposition parties were not contesting as hard or as diligently as Mr. Imran Khan and PTI were contesting these elections. And obviously, there was Mr. Khan is not going to contest
On all
272
seats.
seats. One hope. So, and in the end, when the general elections comes in, then there are many factors. There are local politics, local issues, local alliances. So there are a host of questions. Who is getting the ticket? Who is not getting the tickets? Within the PTI, there will be groups. So those things will impact the election outcome. So you cannot compare by-elections with the general elections. I can give you an example that about a year ahead of 2030 elections, former Prime Minister Yusuf Raza Gilani's seat fell vacant when he was declared, he was disqualified. And his son won that seat with a sound margin in the by-elections. But in the general elections, they could not hold on to those seats. So these are very different aspects.
Let me come back to you. Yasir, in terms of the legal side of things, when we, if this decision goes away, which is what the PTI is hoping for, and the next round of by-elections happen, do you think that, you know, what do you think will legally happen? Is he allowed to run again? Does the former Prime Minister Imran Khan run on all seats again and then they fall vacant? Is there a decision on that also? Do you think there's likely to be a decision on that as far as the court is concerned?
At some point, the court would have to intervene. I mean, it can't be the absurdity of contesting elections again and again on multiple constituencies, for multiple constituencies, and then going ahead with it. There has to be, and there has been litigation, say in India, over this. So now there's a limit in India to about 2 seats, I think, that you can contest. I think something similar will kind of emanate out of this. So that, I think, is very clear. As far as legally this particular judgment is concerned, I think it's going to be very interesting. I think it's going to, the High Court has a very difficult tightrope to walk because on the one hand you have a judgment which talks about, you know, there are certain bars, as we talked about the bars actually on, I think it was 2 days ago. And those bars have to be, we have to see whether the Election Commission can actually cross the bar of 120 days. So it will be interesting. I think the Islamabad High Court has its job cut out for it.
In terms of the credibility, you know, there is a lot that is being said against the institution itself as far as the Election Commission is concerned. Do you think that that will be of any significance when we talk about the general elections that will happen, in terms of how, you know, do you think the court will have comments to, because we've, you know, that is also something the court is quoted on. Do you think there's going to be some perhaps headway there also?
I think as far as the narrative is concerned, the PTI narrative is that the ECP is now completely in
compromised, according to them. Yes.
Exactly. And that, I think, can be dispelled by the courts. If the courts actually uphold, so in this case, if the courts actually uphold this judgment, this decision by the ECP, it would be a huge step forward in sort of giving people confidence in the Election Commission. But in the process, the courts might lose their own credibility, which is obviously that balancing act has to be done and has to be done very carefully by the courts. Because you see, the problem with this judgment is that, and this is unfortunately from as a legal analyst, as someone who has looked at the Election Act and the Constitution, I think it is going to be very hard to sustain this judgment, yes.
But in terms of, Aniq Sahab, in terms of it having its effect on their own political base, on their own, you know, support base, do you think, like, you know, of course there's that argument that I think you said about Trump and the cult following and all of that, but on the other hand, there is now a judgment that stands, and then the Election Commission also will go and initiate criminal proceedings. Whether that is stopped or not, it will have its ramifications for the political party?
Definitely, there are some legal challenges for the party if the judgment is sustained, or even if the judgment say if there is not an immediate suspension of the ECP order.
But there will be, you think, challenges for the ECP if it's not?
But ECP technically there is no issue for ECP, even if this is turned over by the courts. That's fine. There are many verdicts of the ECP which are turned over by the courts. There are many verdicts of the ECP which are lying at different stages of judicial review at Supreme Court and at the High Court. So ECP does not actually get affected by such things. Again, the question is that the Chief Election Commissioner, you cannot remove him until unless there is a due process of law, right? And that due process of law is as hard as removing a judge of the Supreme Court. So this is not something which Mr. Khan can achieve just by making him controversial. Yes, there will be issues when we will have a final look at the election 2023 now. At least we know now that elections will be held somewhere in 2023. So again, there, as has been the case in the past, there will be controversies, there will be some parties who will not be satisfied with the results. So this is common in Pakistan. What Mr. Khan is trying to do is to make him controversial from the word go, so that even if he loses election in 2023, he refuses to accept the result and goes on to the protest mode again. This is his mode of politics, in fact, as most populists are.
According to Murtaza Solanki Sahab, he seems, you know, he says that he's likely to return to the assemblies, the PTI as a political party, and Imran Khan Sahab. Do you think that will happen?
Well, I think the way I look at it is that the institutional and constitutional scheme of things is that until unless he returns to the assembly, he cannot sit on the table and engage with the government for some crucial decisions regarding the elections, for the next caretaker setup, for all those things. So it is very, very interesting. say if we continue like this, Mr. Khan's teams in KP and in Punjab will have to sit with the opposition there to decide upon the caretaker setups in those provinces. But in the center, he says, I don't want to go there. These are the same people who are sitting on in those assemblies also. So if he thinks that he will not, his chief ministers will also not be following the constitutional processes, I think that will be a very, very, I mean, contradictory position. So here also he will have to ultimately come back.
So when there seems to be an acceptance, you know, Yasir, your opinion on this also, but when if there seems to be this acceptance, and that's what it seemed like, I may be wrong, but from the press conference that was held, he seemed to feel that there will likely not be early elections. So from that will be the realization that even if, I mean, it's not that far off if you look at the general elections in August 6th of next year, they're going to end, the term ends.
August 16th, yeah. 16th,
okay,
right?
6th or 16th, whatever. But the point is, they're going to, so for that, they will have to, like you said, inclusion in the processes that are then needed. Is something that is you think now making sense to Imran Khan Sahab?
I think that he is definitely, if that's how he wants to go, if he wants to be part of the process, like Anik Saab said, I mean, somebody's got to appoint the caretaker. So if that is how he wants to go play, I think it makes a lot of sense for him to come back to the assemblies. But he'll come back to the assemblies with a deficit. You see, his already the seats
the
that
two seats, yes, that
he's two seats he's lost, as well as the seats that he's won on, unless of course this decision gets overturned, in which case he'll still have one seat. And the rest of them would also go.
If the decision doesn't get overturned, then I think it's a whole other scenario for the PTI, you know, in terms of what they would, I mean, there must be another, you know,
party leader.
There has to be another party leader also. It will follow then that he has to elect another party leader? Because
yes, it would.
It would.
Because we saw that happen with the former
Nawaz
Prime
Sharif,
Minister Nawaz Sharif Sahab also.
There's Supreme Court jurisprudence on that.
But he is the party president.
He is, and he would be removed as so. Mia Nawaz Sharif is not the party president, as far as I understand.
He was, yes, I think
he is not.
He's not.
Mr.
Shehbaz Sharif Sahab is, yes.
So that's because of the ruling that was given against him.
So then, of course, if that doesn't happen, then it would. But of course, there is an appellate process that will be followed by the PTI, and in that it will be suspended. What happens there?
So there's the appellate process, and this is where, you know, look at the utter unfairness of it. The appellate process was not available to Mr. Mohammad Nawaz Sharif.
Because his decision came from the Supreme
Court, and Supreme Court itself became, and that's something that his Lordship Justice Qazi Faizi Sahab pointed out
Yes, we saw
yesterday.
the remarks that came yesterday.
And that those were on point, and I don't want to say anything to, you know, sort of attract contempt of court, but the fact of the matter is...
Oh, I thought we would talk about them next.
Those remarks?
Please go ahead.
Those remarks?
Yes, those remarks.
Well, we'll discuss the remarks, not the court's verdict.
Right. I think as far as the appellate process is concerned, Mr. Imran Khan has all the options. He's gone against it in the High Court.
So then it suspends the judgment till he's exhausted the appellate process.
Yes.
Right.
And
from the High Court he goes to Supreme Court. I mean, that's a normal.
There's an entire process that has to be followed, and so I don't think that there's. And the other thing is, in any event, this was for time being. This is not a lifetime disqualification.
So that means so this term would then be over on 16th of August.
Yes. Yeah. So that's where the disqualification also ends.
So he will be able to contest according to this case. But then as far as Imran Khan Sahab is concerned, there are other cases also that he's looking at this time. There is the foreign funding case, which is also likely to be something that the PTI has been talking about. And of course, then again, the narrative of the ECP and its role and you know what the PTI has been saying about them becomes relevant.
And this this 191 million pounds case that Mr. Murtaza Solanki referred to, I think that's going to be quite the that is something that is quite likely to shake things up, I think.
I think another point of legal hair splitting will be that within this verdict, there are two parts of it. One is, of course, which has disqualified Mr. Khan. And another part of it is in which ECP is proceeding with the criminal charges.
Yes.
Now, these criminal, these powers of criminal charges and the criminal charges on misdeclaration are provided for in the Political Parties Act, right? So, consider for a moment if disqualification is not held, is not sustained by the High Court, but the ECP's power to proceed with the criminal charges is not suspended, right? So, in that case, Mr. Khan will be looking at criminal charges, a criminal court case in which he can be sentenced for 3 years.
Before a sessions court, yes. Before a sessions court.
Before a session court.
174
and
read
if
by
he
one.
is, if he is sentenced for say 6 months or a year or so, then again a question of disqualification arises.
Disqualification arises, and then this is absolutely fair game.
Yeah.
ECP, so the speaker
No, but
referenced.
are the two mutually exclusive? I mean,
Yeah.
can that's what I want to find out is, can the ECP go in the criminal proceedings, whether whatever the High Court holds? How does that work?
The grounds of challenge that PTI has is the ground of challenge is that ECP did not have the power because ECP did not follow the procedure, which was to go to the Sessions Court under 174 and 190 of the Election Act. Now, once that is done, that is an entirely different, entirely new case that comes up. Therefore, in my opinion, what is going to happen is that once that ball starts rolling, you will have a new case which is going to be separate and entirely different from the one that is there right now.
Okay, so then, of course, I mean, in terms of the cases, of course, we've seen the numerous cases in the political process. We also saw again, like, you know, Qazi Faiz Isa Saab commented on the former Prime Minister Imran Khan Saab's case. And that was, of course, different from Imran Khan Saab's case significantly, and whatever happened there. But overall, as far as the political process is concerned, one hopes that there would be, you know, parliamentary procedure would be followed, there would be healthy debate in parliament, there would be political parties would, you know, have opposition within the parliament, rather than what we've seen with the PTI since the vote of no confidence happened. And you know, Aneek, we saw the vote of no confidence, it's happened in Britain also. And you know, that process we are seeing, certainly, I mean, I don't want to compare Pakistan with them, but the point is, I mean, in this case, this was not an illegal way of moving forward. The vote of no confidence was not unlawful. The way it happened was procedurally correct. So, you know, the way forward could have been for the PTI to stay in the assemblies and conduct a healthy opposition.
Oh yeah, I mean, on the vote of no confidence, its legality or whether it was constitutional or not constitutional is well settled, because it was the Supreme Court which ordered the Speaker to hold the vote. Because vote of confidence and vote of no confidence are two very, very important pillars of parliamentary democracy. You cannot sort of stop that process anyway. Because once you do that, I think the whole structure of the parliamentary democracy falls. So it was legal. It was very legal, very constitutional. And we saw the former Prime
Minister himself take a vote of confidence a little while back. Even you know, I mean that.
So this is beyond question. I mean that PTI's narrative around it is just. I mean,
you can't be a parliamentary democracy without the vote
without
of
no confidence,
exactly.
and the numbers were complete without any floor crossing.
And there was a lot, I mean, before this vote of no confidence happened, a lot was being said about, you know, the fact that there were members within the party who were not happy with the chairman himself, and, you know, there were issues that were arising. Rather than addressing those, you know, likely issues within that. I mean, of course, even now we can say that the PTI could have used this time to address issues like bringing their voter to actual voting, because we've seen them, like I said earlier on, we've seen them have support on social media, but for that to translate into actual votes has been a challenge for the PTI.
Well, that again comes to the election date, when the day of the election, election management and all that. Those are entirely different questions. As for PTI is losing that vote of confidence or the vote of no confidence, passing the numbers, that is very, very clear that Mr. Khan, who is a populist, he in the opposition, he loves to keep the heat on, and he has a remarkable stamina to continue to build pressure. But it is very interesting that Mr. Khan sits on the in different interviews and admits himself that there were other forces who were managing the allies for him, his coalition partners, and somehow I don't know why don't people question him, that if he was a failure in managing his own coalition partners,
and
what is his claim now? What is his claim?
He's also admitted that the numbers that he had were not strong. He didn't have the kind of numbers that he would have liked in the National Assembly, which made him vulnerable. So there's been numerous factors that have been talked about as far as being issues within his governance, and while he was himself in power. Thank you so much for joining us today. Unfortunately, that's all the time we have. Thank you for being with us, Aneek Zafar Saab, Barrister Yasir Hamdani. Thank you for joining us. Murtaza Solanki Saab, thank you for being with us. As far as the situation stands at this time, of course, we know on Monday what happens as far as the disqualification of the former Prime Minister is concerned and how it stands. But overall, of course, we've seen the call for the Long March, awaiting the call for Long March. Whether the Long March moves forward or not, perhaps now is the time again for the PTI to think about coming back to the assemblies, to think about coming back and having a say in the processes that are likely to follow in the next couple of months, which will then determine the future for all political parties. Thank you so much for joining us today.